Welcome to A Dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the writer for adramofoutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Dinah Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is podcast episode 123, week 9 of the Drums of Autumn read-along. Hello! It's another week. It's another couple chapters. This week we are in chapters 14 and 15, and I'm calling it In the Backcountry. The summary goes something like this. With much haste, they leave Cross Creek by night to take Pollyanne to safety. They ride until dawn. Claire learns a new method of tick removal. They come across a spooky abandoned Indian village. They make camp near a stream. Myers tells the story of the Tuscarora. Claire hopes Pollyanne will be accepted by the Indians. Myers and young Ian part with Jamie and Claire to take Pollyanne north. Jamie and Claire head southwest to survey the offered lands. Jamie fights and kills a bear. Claire tends to his wounds. They become acquainted with 3 native hunters. Inside the chapters. Part 5, Strawberry Fields Forever. This is coined Strawberry Fields Forever, and in some upcoming chapters, outside of 14 and 15, we learn what Fraser means. Chapter 14, Flee from Wrath to Come. August 1767. Pollyanne had been hiding in a tobacco shed on the edge of Farquard Campbell's property. Claire notes the lavender sky and the ghostly nature of the woman as she exited the building cloaked. Pollyanne is frightened of the horse and refuses to take the reins. Claire offers to have the woman ride with her, so she feels safer. It's difficult to swap her to Claire's horse, but eventually they get it done. The poor woman is terrified. She clings tightly to Claire. The woman shivers as if chilled behind Claire. Poor sweetie. She's new from Africa, and now she's to be given to the Indians, also known as Native Americans in today's language. She's being given to them for her safety. The appearance of Rollo adds another dimension of fear for Pollyanne and Claire's horse. She nearly squeezed the stuffings out of me when Rollo appeared, stalking out of the bushes like some demon of the forest. My horse didn't like the look of him either and backed up, snorting and stamping, trying to jerk the reins away from me. I had to admit that Rollo was reasonably fearsome, even when he was in an amiable mood, which he was at the moment. Rollo loved expeditions. Still, he undoubtedly presented a sinister aspect. All his teeth were showing in a grin of delight, his slitted eyes half closed as he whiffed the air. Add to that the way the grays and blacks of his coat faded into the shadows, and one was left with the queer and unsettling illusion that he had materialized out of the substance of the night, appetite incarnate. There you go. So poor Pollyanne now sees this giant wolf-like dog. She's never been on a horse and is terrified. This is a whole new thing for her. And she's scared because she knows that trying to help the other woman, Lissa, she's now a legal target as well. She has to understand that's what they're doing. Claire and Jamie try to determine if she understands where they are taking her. Not knowing what tongue she might understand, Jamie reaches out, squeezes her foot, and says, "Freedom." This she understands and sighs in relief. This poor woman, I can not imagine having to run scared into the night. She's going into like the witness protection program. So she's been taken from her home in Africa, put on a boat, brought to North Carolina. She knows a little Gaelic, whatever her native tongue is, and a smattering of English. And in a year, being placed with the Native Americans. But they mean freedom, so it's probably a better option and better than most witness protection programs would be. I'd say they're pretty smart for thinking of putting her in a safe place. Thank goodness Myers has such great connections. Myers leads them in an unspoken urgency. Pollyanne is becoming accustomed to the writing and feeling less afraid. She even dozes, leaning onto Claire's shoulder occasionally. Claire is tired and being lulled by the sound of the horses' hooves and the forest surrounding them. The fatigue of long riding crept over me, too, aided by the hypnotic soft thudding of the horses' feet and the unending susurrus of the pines overhead. We were still in the long leaf forest, and the tall, straight trunks surrounded us like the mass of long sunk ships. Lines of an ancient Scottish song drifted throughout my mind. How many strawberries grow in the salt sea? How many ships sail in the forest? And I wondered muzzily whether the composer had walked through a place like this, unearthly in half-moon and starlight so dreamlike that the borders between the elements were lost. We might as well be afloat as earthbound. The heave and fall beneath me, the rise of planking, and the sound of the pines, the wind in our sails. That's such a beautiful piece of writing right there. And we also get strawberries mentioned again. I like how Diana does that. She has some sort of foreshadowing to what's coming. And we see strawberries in the title of part 5 and in the song that Claire brings up. And they've been on a ship not too long in the past, many ships, and then they crashed into the colonies. So this is really subtle and it's rich, and you can feel what the forest feels like, how it's enveloping them, and how it's surreal, and it's difficult to tell up from down. Just like when Claire was near drowning in the water, you don't know which side is up. You might be swimming toward the bottom of the ocean as far as you know, as to the top. And Claire is always inspecting the surroundings and applying them to what's going on. It's her touchstone. She is so bound to nature. It's difficult to imagine her without it. And as much as she loves a hot bath, she's just as comfortable living rough and being outside and participating in all that nature has for her. At dawn, they stopped to rest during the light and heat of the day. They woke covered in ticks, though Claire, as usual, seems to not attract the appetite of the 18th century bugs. She, however, carefully checks Jamie and everyone else after they slept. Pollyanne has a different method of tick removal that Claire finds interesting. I had been too tired to take much notice of our fugitive when we made camp, rightly assuming that she wasn't going to wander off into the wilderness by herself. She had wandered as far as a nearby stream, though returning with a bucket of water. She set this on the ground, dipped up a handful of water, and funneled it into her mouth. She chewed vigorously for a moment, cheeks puffed out. Then she motioned me aside, and lifting a surprised Jamie's arm, spat forcefully and profusely into his armpit. She reached into the dripping hollow, and with the delicate fingers appeared to tickle the parasite. She certainly tickled Jamie, who was very sensitive in that particular region. He turned pink in the face and flinched at her touch, all the muscles in his torso quivering. She held tight to his wrist, though, and within seconds the bulging tick dropped off into the palm of her hand. She flicked it disdainfully away and turned to me with a small air of satisfaction. The seeds that she chewed are called pawpaw. And as a reminder, within the written post that goes with the podcast, the basic show notes that I use as my script, there are links to interesting things, definitions, events, people, ingredients, which pawpaw to me is an ingredient. And we learn they are toxic if swallowed. Pollyanne's stature reminds Claire of African fertility images. She's kind of squat and round and looks hardy. After dinner, Pollyanne is willing to ride on her own. She is more comfortable with Claire and excitedly communicates the best she can. Claire understands her better than she understands Claire. Apparently, Claire isn't so skilled with body language communication. This shows us what Pollyanne's personality really is like. And Claire has seen this exuberancy coming from this woman. They enter a clearing with grassy mounds. Pollyanne is disquieted. She believes this place is evil. Myers explains this place likely used to be a Tuscarora village. He isn't sure what happened. Illness or warfare could be the culprit. They all decided to ride on because it's a bit creepy. They are climbing higher into the mountains. The landscapes change to chestnut trees, oak, hickory, dogwood, persimmon, chinkapin, and poplar. So, many varieties of trees are in this forest of the mountains. The air is lighter and fresher. They have left the smothering heat and humidity of the lowlands. Claire is connecting with nature with every joyous breath. We just see her easing into it. As fearful as she is of Jamie choosing Governor Tryon's land offering, this is where Claire belongs. She's not to be locked up in a house and having people do everything for her. She needs to be out in nature and farming and gardening, making her medicines, treating people, and being able to commune with nature how she needs to. I imagine that she was really suffocated living in a big city like Boston for all those years, where, though it's very pretty and picturesque, it's a big city. And she spent most of her time, once Brianna wasn't small, at the hospital after medical school. So this must be a resurgence for her, kind of a rebirth and renewal. On the 6th day, they are deep into the mountains when they come across a large waterfall. Young Ian is surprised to hear Myers say it's not the biggest one he's ever seen. They camp near a stream, hoping for a dinner of fresh trout. Pollyanne brings a bucket of water to make a batch of corn dodgers. It's like a fried corn fritter. Again, there's a link. They are delicious when fresh and edible for a few days, though they lose their yummy. They get pretty unpalatable after 3 or 4 days, though they are some nutrition. Pollyanne is not her normal exuberant self. This is the last night they are all together. Myers will take her into the Indian territory the next day. Maybe she is worried about her uncertain future. Pollyanne makes the batter. Claire tends the fire. Myers goes to smoke a pipe, while Jamie and young Ian continue fishing. Claire wonders what type of place Pollyanne is from, and what things could be going through her mind. It's a great unknown. She's really concerned for this woman, and she feels really responsible for her. And I love that about Jamie and Claire, that they have this strong sense of ownership of the things that were happening at Jocasta's plantation. Rollo joins them by the fire. He noses both Claire and Pollyanne. Pollyanne, not wanting his attentions, turns and spits right in his eye. With no particular expression, she turned her head and spat in his eye. He yelped, backed up, and stood shaking his head, looking thoroughly surprised. She looked up at me and grinned, her teeth very white in her face. I laughed and decided not to worry too much. Anyone capable of spitting in a wolf's eye would likely cope with the Indians, wilderness, and anything else that came along. Claire is probably right. If this woman has the tenacity to spit in giant Rollo's eye, she's going to get along wherever she goes. The corn dodgers are cooking, filling the area with comforting smells. The fire seems a place of refuge in this wild place. She wonders if fire had held back jungle darkness, protecting Pollyanne and her people from leopards. Was it a comfort in her land, or just an illusion of safety? It had to be an illusion, since she was taken and brought to the colonies. Claire dared not ask. So she seems pretty invested in this woman and wants to know her backstory and wants to know what she feels and thinks about all the changes going on. Maybe it's because Claire, her first trip back through the stones, it was not by her choice. She fell through the stones and she was taken along for this ride, and she didn't know the language and had no idea what was going on. And it was completely out of her control, and she had to marry Jamie and do all these things in order to survive. Okay. So maybe Pollyanne is not so different from Claire in Claire's mind. Like Claire was on a holiday with Frank to kind of re-cement their marriage after the war. And then she falls through the stones. So there are some similarities here. It's an interesting thing to think about. So maybe that's why Claire is so thoughtful and intent on helping this woman. The fishing is very good. Jamie and young Ian are ecstatic for their catches. I've never seen such fishing, never, Jamie repeated for the fourth time, a look of dreamy bliss on his face as he broke open a steaming trout fried in cornmeal. They were swarming in the water. Were they not, Ian? Ian nodded, a similar look of reverence in his own homely features. Diana Gabaldon means homely as in kind, not ugly. Maybe plain. My dad would give his other leg to have seen it. They jumped on the hook, auntie, truly. The Indians don't generally bother with hook and line, Myers put in neatly, spearing his own share of fish with his knife. They build snares and fish traps, or sometimes they put some sticks and rubbish across the creek to prevent the fish, then stand above with the sharp stick, just spearing them from the water. I like Myers. The mere mention of Indians by Myers has young Ian asking questions. The conversation turns to the abandoned village they'd passed through earlier. Myers explains about the Tuscarora War from 40 years earlier. The result was a devastation to the Tuscarora Nation with only 7 villages left. In fact, the Mohawk adopted the Tuscarora, or they would have been completely wiped out. And because of the adoption, they were allowed entrance to the Iroquois League. This is really of important historical note, and again, there's a link about the Tuscarora War and for the Iroquois League. This is where the nations of natives banded together so they would have a stronger voice. Oh, they're fierce, all right, but they're mortal. Indians are men of blood and none more than the Mohawk. They're men of honor, mind. But there's a sight of things they'll kill for. Some reasonable, some not. They raid, do you see, amongst themselves. And they'll kill for revenge. Ain't nothing will stop a Mohawk bent on revenge, save you kill him. And even then, his brother or his son or his nephew will come after you. Sometimes Indians don't kill for any reason a man would say mattered, especially when liquor is involved. Yes, Myers has it right for sure. He further explains how the Indians cannot hold their drink. Even the first drop is too much for them. Also, their numbers need replacing, so with their similar languages, the Mohawk took in the Tuscarora. These are the people Myers means to have Pollyanne adopted into. Claire asks if the Tuscarora have seen a black woman before. He thinks there are many who've never seen a white person before. He thinks they will like her just fine. I should say they'd find her handsome, though they do like a woman as is sweetly plump. It was moderately obvious that Myers shared this admiration. His eyes drifted over Pollyanne with an appreciation touched with innocent lasciviousness. She saw it, and an extraordinary change came over her. She seemed scarcely to move, and yet all at once her whole person was focused on Myers. No white showed around her eyes. They were black and fathomless, shining in the firelight. She was still short and heavy, but with only the slightest change of posture, depth of bosom and width of hip were emphasized, suddenly curved in a promise of lewd abundance. Pollyanne is very good at this body language thing. And Myers appreciates what he sees in front of her, and he has a lot of dealings with the Indians. So he will know what they appreciate as well. Claire and Jamie aren't sure if this exchange would be a good thing or not, meaning between Myers and Pollyanne. They have eye conversation over it. Jamie speaks up and puts a hand on Myers. I shouldn't like to think the woman will be misused in any way. Will you undertake to guarantee her safety, Mr. Myers? Oh, yes. That is, I mean to say, oh, no, indeed. The Mohawk and the Tuscarora both. Their women choose who they bed with, even who they marry. No such things as rape among 'em. Oh, no, sir, she won't be misused, I can promise that. Well, I'm glad to hear it. Jamie sat back at ease and gave me an I trust you're satisfied glare out of the corner of his eye. I smiled demurely. Claire wanted to make sure if Myers was going to be bedding with Pollyanne that it was appropriate, as well as when Pollyanne gets to the village, if the men there would take advantage of her. So in the Mohawk and Tuscarora cultures, the women choose their bedmates and they choose their husbands. And as long as they want to stay married, they're allowed to stay married. If they choose not to stay married, they don't have to, and it's not a big deal. They just kick the man out and get another one. It's how it works. Young Ian jumps in and says he's going with Mr. Myers to the Indian village. He told his Uncle Jamie. He did not ask for permission. Clever boy knows Jamie can't say it's too dangerous, or why are they taking a woman and leaving her there? Young Ian is savvy. The mating ritual is in full swing between Myers and Pollyanne. Without words, she blatantly invites him to bed with her. As they all bed down for the night, Claire wonders if she would do differently. If she was dependent upon a man to get her to safety, would she not do anything to ensure he protected her? Didn't she make that choice once? When a snapping sound alarms Jamie to take his hand from under Claire's shirt, then replace it with the squeeze of her breast, knowing there's no danger. No difference at all, she thinks. Her future isn't certain either, and she depended upon Jamie, a man bound to her in part by desire for her body. She describes the cool night, the wind, and the sky. But ultimately there were differences between her dependency on Jamie and Pollyanne being with Myers. She and Jamie were bonded beyond flesh, and above all, simply for the fact that she had chosen to be there. This time, Claire chose to be there. This time. The first time, she did not choose to be there. She was basically forced to marry Jamie, though she fell in love with him in the process. It was an arranged marriage to keep her out of Blackjack Randall's hands. So this is where Claire sometimes remembers things a little differently. She can be a wee bit unreliable, as it were. So she did make the same kind of choice. Pollyanne is inviting Myers to her bed. He's responsible to get her safely to the Indian village and to transition her to be adopted into those people safely. It's currency, right? Everybody wins. And Claire married Jamie the first time. I mean, Dougal had some like Machiavellian things going on in there because Jamie was going to be the heir, right? Or the clan chief in his mind, but then when he married a Sassenach, that couldn't happen. So this is interesting to see Claire's take here. Chapter 15, Noble Savages. After making plans to meet in 10 days' time, Jamie and Claire turned southwest, while Myers, young Ian, and Pollyanne turned to the north. Claire takes in the vastness of this place, beautiful, rich, and wild. Claire said nothing to Jamie about her worries about anyone being able to live in such a place. She simply followed along behind him. When something new is going on, her thoughts are often filled with all the what-ifs, the things she's scared of before she comes to a sense of okay. Do you do this? Where you panic ahead of time and you have anxiety, but then you're fine once whatever happens, happens? That's how I am. I kind of run through all the pathways and all the what-ifs, and then when it comes down to it, just do it, and it's okay. She must allow the chaos and worry to make itself known before settling into certainty of a decision. They make camp near a stream. It's twilight. The fireflies are out. Jamie loves this time of day. It's when he would leave the cave after Culloden. Oh, the wee bugs come out just now, the moths and the midges, oh, the bitty things that hang about in clouds over the water. You see the swallows come for them, and then the bats swooping down, and the salmon rising to the evening hatch and making rings on the water. His eyes were open now, fixed on the waving sea of grass on the hillside, but I knew he saw instead the surface of the tiny loch near Lallybroch, alive with fleeting ripples. It's only a moment, but you feel as though it will last forever. Strange, is it no? You can almost see the light go as you watch, and yet there's no time you can look and say, now it is night. Claire remembers Father Anselm from the Abbey. He always said there was a time of day when time seemed to stop. He thought it could be the hour one was born at. Jamie thinks the father is right. I do. Perhaps he was right then, for I was born at supper time, just at twilight on the 1st of May. Have I never told you that story? How my mother had put on a pot of brose to cook, and then her pains came on so fast she'd no time to think of it, and no one else remembered either until they smelled this burning, and it ruined the supper and the pot as well. There was nothing else in the house to eat, save a great gooseberry pie, so they all ate that. But there was a new kitchen made, and the gooseberries were green, and all of them, except my mother and me, of course, spent the night writhing with the indigestion. My father said it was months before he could look at me without feeling his bowels cramp. How cute is that? So I wonder if there's anything to that. If there's a particular time of day you like most because it was your time of birth. I'll have to look at my children and see. I have no idea what time I was born. I'd have to look. Claire doesn't know her own hour of birth. And it wasn't written on her birth certificate. She knows when Brianna was born, though, 3:03 a.m. Jamie is surprised to learn Claire was awake for the birth because she had told him of twilight sleep. Why the hell not? I've never seen a woman give birth, but I've heard it's more than once, I'll tell you. And damned if I can see why a woman in her right mind would do it, and there's any chance about it. Well, I thought I was going to die, and I didn't want to die in my sleep. Claire was sure she was going to die in birth. So this is a keen difference if you are just reading the book and you've seen the TV show, is in the show they made a kind of feminist, angry ploy about them putting Claire under anesthesia when she didn't want it. In the book, she had a natural birth. After hearing this, Jamie explains all the ways he almost died, and he'd be okay dying in his sleep, in bed next to her when he was very old. So Jamie tended to the fire while Claire went to fish. It was dark when she returned with the gutted fish. She asked Jamie what he thinks it's like to die. And she says, "Man is like the grass that withers and is thrown into the fire. He is like the sparks that fly upward, and his place will know him no more. Is there nothing after, do you think?" "I canna say." "That is what the church says, but..." "No, I canna say, but I think it will maybe be all right." He tilted his head, pressing his cheek against my hair for a moment, then stood up, reaching for his dirk. Jamie set to cook the fish. Claire thinks about the hours she sat where time stops. It's peaceful, without a name. If death lies there, she'd be okay with it. Remember in the Abbey with Father Anselm, they would do the hour of sitting, that devotional hour? Well, when she was in Boston, she would often go to the church they attended, and she would do the hour of devotion there as well. This was a practice that Claire had kept up, and it did give her a sense of peace. Her eyes were closed. She feels Jamie brush her shoulder. Then she hears Jamie, 8 feet away, exclaim from cutting himself, "Jamie, is there someone behind me?" His eyes shifted to the shadows over my shoulder and sprang wide. I didn't wait to look around, but flung myself flat on the ground, an action that likely saved my life. There was a loud woof, and a sudden strong smell of ammonia and fish. Something struck me in the back with an impact that knocked the breath out of me and then stepped heavily on my head, driving my face into the ground. It is a large black bear, as a matter of fact. Jamie was brawling the bear. It is quite a fight. Jamie is holding his own. Jamie tells Claire to run. But she must do something. She finds the fish that had been flung into the clearing, and she thought she was hitting the bear on the nose with it. The bear notices Claire, and it goes after her, with Jamie clinging to its neck with a death grip. Claire moves fast. She heard growling and Gaelic screeches among the rolling mass. She was yelling for Jamie. She smells blood in the air. Jamie finally crawls into the clearing. Disregarding my own bruises, I ran to him and dropped to my knees beside him. "God, Jamie, are you all right?" "No," he said shortly and collapsed on the ground, wheezing gently. His face was no more than a pale blotch in the starlight. The rest of his body was so dark as to be nearly invisible. I found out why as I ran my hand swiftly over him. His clothes were soaked with blood, that they stuck to his body. His hunting shirt coming away from his chest with the nasty little sucking sound as I pulled at it. "You smell like a slaughterhouse," I said, feeling under his chin for a pulse. It was fast. No great surprise, but strong, and a wave of relief washed over me. "Is that your blood or the bear's?" "If it was mine, Sassenach, I'd be dead," he said testily, opening his eyes. "No credit to you that I'm not, mind." He rolled painfully onto his side and slowly got to his hands and knees, groaning. "What possessed you, woman, to hit me in the head with a fish whilst I was fighting for my life?" So Claire thought she was hitting the bear, yet she was hitting Jamie in the head with the fish. That is so hilarious. Well, Claire tells him to be quiet and assesses for injury. There's nothing broken, but he has terrible bruising in his ribs. And then he's okay for the moment. Claire goes to calm the frightened horses. When she returns, the fire is rekindled. He does have scratches on his back from the bear claws, and as she looks at his back, they discuss why a black bear would attack. Usually provocation caused them to do so. Claire peels his shredded shirt away to see 4 gouges. The back of his shirt hung in shreds, smeared with dirt and ash, splotched with blood. His blood this time, not the bear's, but luckily not much. I gently pulled the tattered pieces of the shirt apart, exposing the long bow of his neck. 4 long claw marks ran from shoulder blade to armpit, deep, wicked gouges that tapered to superficial red welts. "Ooh," I said in sympathy. "Well, it's no as though my back was much to look at anyway." "Really, is it bad?" So, somehow Jamie does not get life-threatening injuries, right? But she needs to clean the wounds. And she remembers seeing Arrowhead growing by the stream. So she gives him a bottle of ale. He assures her he'll be fine and goes to get the medicinal plant. So I looked up Arrowhead. It can be used for scratches, but it's mostly used for things like indigestion and headache. Again, there's a link to tell you all about the herbal uses of Arrowhead. The stream is cold. As she collected the plant, frogs sang around her. It felt so peaceful, until the stress of what just happened hit her. She shook so violently she needed to sit down. Death could come any time. The thought of losing Jamie in a blink of an eye terrified her. She splashes cold water on her face and heads back to him. She can fight any infection that might occur. His care is in her hands now. As she returns to him, he's sitting bolt upright. "Claire?" "Walk up behind me, Sassenach, and put your knife into my left hand. Then stay behind me." Hard hammering, I took the 3 steps that brought me high enough to see over his shoulder. On the far side of the clearing, just within the light of the fire, stood 3 Indians, heavily armed. Evidently, the bear had been provoked. The 3 Indians, one older, 2 younger, sized up Jamie and Claire while they did the same. The men didn't speak French or English. They rely on gestures and body language. One of the young men mimics a bear. Jamie points to where it lies. Jamie understands. They are hunters and have no ill intention. Then he thinks he's going to faint. Claire won't let him. The men drag the bear over near the fire. The men are impressed that Jamie killed the bear with his bare hands and dirk. One of them decides he can treat Jamie's wounds. Shoving me unceremoniously to one side, the younger man ripped open the throat of Jamie's shirt, pulled it off his shoulder, and squinted at the injury. He poured a handful of a lumpy, half-powdery substance into his hand, spat copiously into it, stirred it into a foul-smelling paste, and smeared it liberally over the wounds. "No, I really am going to puke. What is that stuff?" "At a guess, it's dried trillium mixed with very rancid bear grease. I don't suppose it will kill you. At least, I hope not." Their day has just been so adventurous. Jamie is pale and barely holding to consciousness. He asks for whiskey. This is risky, knowing how alcohol is dangerous for Indians to drink, and they're certainly going to want some of it. And if he didn't offer to share it, they would just take it. The older man appreciated the bouquet of the whiskey. He doesn't drink from it, though. He has another purpose in mind. The older man stood up with the bottle in his hand, but instead of drinking, took it over to where the bear's carcass lay, black as an inkblot on the ground. With great deliberation, he poured a small amount of whiskey into the palm of his hand, bent, and dribbled the liquid into the bear's half-open mouth. Then he turned slowly in a circle, shaking drops of whiskey ceremoniously from his fingers. The drops flew gold and amber where they caught the light, hitting the fire with tiny sizzling pops. Jamie sat up straight, dizziness forgotten in his interest. "Will you look at that now?" "At what?" The older man took the pipe and drew several deep, leisurely mouthfuls, which he exhaled with evident pleasure. Then he knelt, and taking another deep lungful of smoke, carefully blew it up the nostrils of the dead bear. He repeated the process several times, muttering something under his breath as he exhaled. The man then handed the pipe to Jamie. When it was Claire's turn, she inhaled instead of only allowing the smoke to enter her mouth. One of the men comes up to Claire to ensure she's a woman. To her surprise, he reaches out and grabs her breast. He gestures if she and Jamie are together. Jamie says she's his. They were going to skin the bear, but Jamie claims the right to do so. Before he begins, he says the Gralach prayer. The men were impressed by his praying over the bear. It's hard work skinning an animal. Jamie eventually offers his knife to one of the men. This meant he's offering part of the meat as well. Claire wants to know what the older man did with the whiskey. Jamie nods, eyes fixed absently on the bloody work by the fire. It's a charm. You scatter holy water to the four airs of the earth to preserve yourself from evil. And I suppose whiskey is a very reasonable substitute for holy water in the circumstances. But that's why they were impressed by Jamie stopping and saying a ceremonial prayer as well. From evil? Do you mean they're afraid of us? He smiled. I shouldn't think we're so fearsome, Sassenach. No, from spirits. So they're a lot more alike than you might think. But then Claire lets this run through her mind. And she often forgets how formidable Jamie is and what he must look like to others. She can see the air of savagery in him. It's not just the English who think Highlanders are barbarians, it seems. Yet these men understood quickly he was a fellow hunter and a civilized man. It's fascinating how you can look barbaric or savage, but at the same time be known by somebody similar as being civilized and what your purpose is. Jamie was gesturing and acting out the bear attack. He included Claire hitting him in the head with a fish mid-fight. They eat dinner together under the watchful, dead eyes of the bearhead. They were sharing stories. They exchanged names. Claire's name came out Cla, which they found exceedingly funny and said over and over. These men are Tuscarora. One was named Ncognito. Jamie asked the names of the items surrounding them. He's quickly picking up their language, just as Jamie would do. Claire is too tired to stay awake for any more of the conversation. Jamie is well enough. She curls up under his feet, under the watchful eyes of the dead bear, and she sleeps. So that's the end of these 2 chapters. What an adventurous week they've had. They take Pollyanne from the near grip of the law to the backcountry. While young Ian and Myers took her to the Indians, Jamie and Claire headed toward the land the governor offered him. The bear attack scared the daylights out of them both. This land is wild and dangerous. Death could come easily at any time. Do you suppose people valued the moments more then, knowing there were so many ways death could come? I think we believe death is far away in our westernized lives. There's a sense of delayed mortality. We're always shocked when a death or major illness occurs. It's an illusion of safety, just like Pollyanne had in her African village. It's a good reminder to make time for the truly important things in life. I am always captured by how Jamie and Claire talk about things. Their conversations are meaningful, yet seem easy. They've fallen back into their voiceless and verbal communication with barely a learning curve. I do think the Outlander series is a marriage manual. Wow. And what about Claire thinking about Pollyanne doing something, and would she do the same, and not connecting the dots that she absolutely did the same when she first went through the stones unwittingly? And what do you think Jamie's nickname is going to be? I'm sure the Indians will give him one. I did get an email from Meredith of Everett, Washington. Thank you for sending it to me again. It looks like the Outlander Season 3 DVD is going to be out. I believe it is on April 10th. You can pre-order it on Amazon or from other sources today. So the other thing that she had to say was how much she likes the conversation Claire and Jamie have about their favorite time of day and how it could be related to when you were born. But somehow I doubt that. I wasn't born near twilight time, yet that's my favorite time of day. I also have to say that while these chapters don't deal directly with Aunt Jocasta, I'm amazed at her patience with this situation. Anyone else wouldn't have let Claire perform surgery on a party crashing drunk in front of her guests. Now, here they are escorting a woman into the forest rather than face her. She's a rather remarkable character. Well, Jocasta was part of this plan because she didn't want to see another slave of hers put to death or be brought up in front of the law or be charged with something. So I think Jocasta wanted them to do this. Remember, Pollyanne was being hidden on Farquard Campbell's land, and he is the law. He's a judge. So I do agree that Jocasta is patient, but it gave her some serious street credibility having Claire do surgery on Myers in her salon. I mean, that means River Run is like the talk of society for a long time. I just love that so much. So next week we have chapters 16 and 17 that we're going to be covering. So be ready for that. And how can you participate? You can send comments to contact@adramofOutlander.com or call the listener line at 719-425-9444. Or you can comment on the post on the website, adramofOutlander.com. And if you're reading ahead, you can leave comments for any part of the book, too, through email or voicemail. Please join the weekly Twitter chat. It's Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and use the hashtag ADOO for A Dram of Outlander. Any comments or messages may be included in the podcast or the written post. Where can you find A Dram of Outlander? Well, on Facebook, there's a pretty large page, A Dram of Outlander. And you could ask to join the group, A Dram of Outlander. You have to answer 3 simple questions to make sure you are a real person, not a bot, nor a troll, to join the group. And it's fun. And it's really about listeners or those who join the group wanting to participate more and together, because the page is really driven by me. The group can be driven by you because it's about interaction of members. On Twitter and Instagram, it is Dram of Outlander. And how can you support the podcast? Well, you can go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and you can leave a rating. That helps people find me. Please share the posts. Share the podcast, get people to listen, have your friends come and join the group, or follow on Twitter or Instagram. There's a whole lot of ways to be supportive and grow the Dram of Outlander community. And lastly, you can financially support the podcast. Every dollar counts. I am a solo podcaster who does the production, the editing, and everything else that's involved in the upkeep of a website and a weekly podcast. And you can go to patreon.com/a drama of Outlander or contact me privately if you'd like to do a one-time offering. I appreciate you so very much. And without you guys, there's no podcast. I really do this for you. I mean, I would be rereading the book anyway on my own. I don't think I would be going through the detailed reading that I do and looking up all the different links of interest or items of interest that I find while I'm reading. But it gives me such more of a deep love for this writing. I mean, it's amazing. And I know it all can't make it into the TV show, and that's fine. I know characters are going to be like put together and certain things compressed and new stuff added. That's fine. It's an adaptation. But coming back to these books, it's all here. It's always all here for us to appreciate. And so I'm excited about doing 9 months with you, or however long this is going to take. So I just appreciate you, and I would love to hear more from you. I want your comments. I want your feedback. I want your ideas. And if you are somebody who makes an Outlander-inspired product or item that you would like me to host a giveaway for, awesome. Get in touch with me at either contact@adramaofoutlander or 719-425-9444, or if you are somebody who would like to sponsor the show and be an advertiser, contact me in either one of those ways and I'll get back to you. So thank you so much for listening and taking this journey with me through Drums of Autumn. And until next time, Slán je va.